because it wasn't just like one teacher is really bad at that, right? I mean, because like that happens, but then you get to a different grade level in a different school or whatever, and it's different. But like the fact that for that long, ooh, that's crazy.
Hmm.
But then, like, why even bother with the two? Like,
Yeah.
where'd those come in?
This is the same way I send out regional newsletters. There should have been a lot.
Like once a month, Stefan's like, I really need to do the newsletters.
Oh,
And then
I
he
get
doesn't
it.
do it.
Welcome to Spedsplaining, where special education gets decoded one case at a time. I'm Stefan, a former classroom teacher and current instructional coach, and I'm joined by three brilliant minds in special education, Darcy, Anna, and Leanne. Each week, they take real stories, often from right here in Washington, and break them down into plain language. We use these stories as a launch pad to explore the wild, wonderful, and sometimes frustrating world of general and special education. Whether you're an educator, parent, advocate, or just curious about how the system really works, we've got you. Let's dive in.
So this case is not in Washington State, but I found that it was timely because it is progress reporting season. And I've heard a lot from my staff about the workload with that. And then also just this was a case that was mentioned at our law conference this year, and I had wanted to look into a couple of those deeper. So here I go. So this is about a student who was tested in fourth grade for a disability, and it was based on his difficulty acquiring basic reading and math skills. So he was found to be specific learning disabled due to the severe discrepancy model, which is a gap between, well, maybe I should see if Stefan remembers the discrepancy model. Have we talked about it? I don't always remember the things that we have covered and not covered.
We have talked about it. Someone give me a hint.
Okay, so specific learning disability, we've talked about how we're changing in Washington State in 2028 away from severe discrepancy model to the MTSS way of identifying students for a learning disability. Currently, we use the severe discrepancy, which is we're able to figure out with just standardized tests and not necessarily looking at their response to intervention.
Okay.
Does that help?
I think so, because was that the whole standard deviations thing? Is that where that all comes into play? All right, got that. And so there's like, you would like run some tests, 2 or more standard deviations in certain areas that I'm not going to be able to pull
That's
out.
a little different.
Oh, dang it. I should have just stopped talking while I was ahead, or at least level.
It's good. We're going to review this for our listeners too.
That's good.
So
yeah.
Severe discrepancy, we are looking at the gap between potential and achievement. So when we're measuring academic potential, we usually give a very traditional, lots of flaws in it IQ test. We get this full scale score of their IQ, and then we look at their achievement in reading, writing, math. And if there's a severe discrepancy between those scores, we might say that a student qualifies in those areas.
Gotcha. There's
many flaws with that, but that's not what this case is about. Not necessarily. It plays in. So this kid was identified as having a specific learning disability and had an IEP. This whole thing starts in 2017 with having an IEP in 2017 was the first year. And in the 18-19 school year, there wasn't a single progress report sent home, which in itself is an issue, but we're going to keep going. I also want to talk about quickly, though, the difference between a progress report and progress monitoring. How often do we have to send progress reports? Stefan, do you know that one?
For SPED specifically? Oh, I have no idea. Every grading cycle since that was
right.
Is it really?
Oh, it is.
Good job.
Absolutely is. I mean, an IEP team could decide to send them more frequently than that, but that would be the minimum standard. So if you're on quarters, you're sending them quarterly. If you're on semesters, you're sending them on the semester,
Okay.
trimesters usually.
All right.
So the IEP, though, stated that progress was going to be reported every 9 weeks, which is the same as report cards on a quarter system.
They didn't send home
So
one?
then they didn't even send one in 1819. This parent is not one of those, from what I read, and of course I don't know the parent personally, but is not one of those parents that we would say, what was the word we used last episode? A Hawkeye parent.
Hawkeye, yeah.
This is a parent that didn't maybe understand the educational system well enough to advocate for their child, because that would be a huge red flag if you were a helicopter Hawkeye parent. You'd be like, where's my progress report? It says in the IEP I'm going to get it. You'd already be upset. This parent's just going, I'm worried. I'm worried about the transition now from elementary to middle school. So I think another thing that happens is when our kids are in elementary school, the grading is so odd sometimes that you don't really know how your kids are doing.
Yeah,
so,
I was looking at our kids' report card the other day and I was like, which letter's bad? I don't like their CSR. It's a very confusing.
So as soon as the kid gets in middle school, you're getting these letter grades that you do understand as a parent. And you're like, wait, that doesn't look good.
And are ironically more problematic if we want to go down that road.
Right.
But that's a lot of the pushback right at the elementary level is like, it's not the way I grew up being graded or think about grades. And so why is my kid at a 2? You know, how come they're not all 4s? Well, it's a philosophical shift. And we don't do a good job of communicating that to parents as a system.
Right. And even as an educator, and you guys are educators, it's still not super clear because every district does it slightly different. And every teacher might even use the rubrics slightly different. So grading is tremendously flawed. But one thing that we do know is that every parent, every kid probably understands that a D and an F is bad. So that's what started happening. The kid got into middle school and the letter grades were an A in PE, C's in math, English, and social studies, and then D in science for the first 2 quarters. Then they got a progress report that same year that said the student was making some progress and mastery was anticipated. That's not super helpful either.
I would like to see their definition of some. Is that
also, how do you anticipate mastery?
Right. So
they're moving along and we're hopeful.
I mean, that box does exist on IEP Online too. So our IEP writer that most of us use in Washington State, it's not like OSPI mandates that, but we tend to use it. It does have a box that we can check that says we anticipate that the student will meet this goal. So I'm guessing that that's kind of what that looked like.
Which I was joking, but like that I can see how that would be helpful. Is like for the same comment that I made earlier about how come my kid's at a 2. If I was worried about that, I was to hear from my student's teacher and they're to say they're at a 2 now, but they're making adequate progress, and we are, barring any unforeseen circumstances, we're going to be at mastery by the end of the year. So don't freak. Learning is a process. Makes sense.
I mean, like, that's kind of part of the point of objectives, right? Is like you should be able to plot out progress along this graph, and like as long as you're on target with the trajectory, then like that is the way that you would say we're anticipating that they're going to meet this goal. If you were to be that like data specific, which I don't know that we always are.
Well, and we stopped writing objectives, which has been a problem in my professional opinion, because we could say the progress on this year-long goal, I can't say is showing up because I'm measuring this thing that's a year away, but at least I can show you that there has been progress on this objective that leads to this year-long goal. So we kind of have, I mean, data is just difficult and reporting progress to parents is difficult, but I think that box is almost a check for the IEP team or that particular case manager to say, no, they're not making a ton of progress yet, but I don't need to amend the IEP because I anticipate mastery. I'm looking at Darcy now to be like, is that how you would interpret that box?
Yeah, I think so. And it's an easy thing to do to mark the box versus put a data point in there.
Mm-hmm.
And
So,
I know it's data season because you said like it's taking a lot of time. And yes,
mm-hmm.
but also we should be keeping formative data all throughout the process. So it should really just be pulling knowledge or a piece of paper of what we have.
And you know that our team is wonderful at that, but it still just takes time to enter that and then get them to the case managers and get them home. And it is a process, but it is important that we sit down and really look at our kids' progress in that structure of quarterly or however often, so that we are amending IEPs if they're not on track, if they're not aligned with the student's performance. So in 2020, that spring, the parent expressed concern and requested a one-on-one for instruction. So the team said, we're doing a reeval soon. And in 2021 school year in November, did a reeval and found the student's IQ was a 70, which was 11 points lower than in 2018. And 70 is pretty significant in our world too, because 70 is where we start to look at if it's an intellectual disability versus a specific learning disability, which we hope that a lot of kids that have a specific learning disability on their IEP have cognitive functioning more in an average range, but that was not the case for this student, it sounds like. So
did they have did they change the category? Did
they
they
did
have other
not.
data to assume that the
Oddly
child was more?
enough, they left it at SLD and said there's still a severe discrepancy. So the IQ is 70, but the achievement tests now are looking like 59. So, yeah. So we have thoughts about that. That seems like maybe when you have that big of a difference between what possible disability category a student fits in and what their instruction might look like tied to that disability category, I will say that some of the goals seem really outrageous. So, and that was a judgmental sentence, but they did end up really changing them. So, for example, they started out with the student will be able to multiply and divide within 100 with 80% accuracy. The student will cite textual evidence from a text with the use of worksheets, discussion, questions, research projects, and discussions. Let's see. Then the student was also, it said on their evaluation that they qualify for specially designed instruction because of deficits in multiplication and division using manipulatives, fact sheets, time drilled, repeated practice, and observation. But then they went down to these goals that were more that the student would be able to read at the second grade level with 80% mastery. So it just felt like they really had these high level goals that were probably aligned to the standards of that grade level. And then they did this testing. They didn't change the category, but the goals were significantly lower. So the next year, 2021-22, they gave
can I
this.
ask another question?
Uh-huh.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. During the time of that eval and whether they changed the category or anything, what were the goals before that met? Like I know they have bad grades, but were they making progress on those goals? Did they say?
So they didn't send any progress reports in the 21-22 school year either.
Also, for like 4 years, they haven't been sending progress reports.
I mean,
really not looking good on district side right now.
Right. So when they have the IEP meetings, they're saying the kid's making progress. There's narrative about that. There's gen ed teachers coming in and saying there's progress. There's no progress reports. And I looked at, so this is a different state, right? So the way that they write goals, it is the benchmark and then 2 goals underneath that benchmark. And then they have a line that says date of mastery. So you're supposed to write just the date of mastery. There wasn't even a spot for the case manager to say, they're on track for something or not on track or putting data in. It was just you write in when that particular benchmark was met. So there was no evidence that any of the benchmarks that the IEP team had set had ever been met. So we can assume that that's a problem, right? So in 6 school years, the district didn't complete a single date of mastery. The special ed director started getting involved and must have realized that that was an issue and offered some compensatory ed and paid for tutoring at Sylvan Learning Center, which we know is a national company.
It took this long for the sped director to get involved, because that right there, sped director is doing the right thing by oh man, we've messed up, let's fix this before it becomes a big problem. But it's been a really long time.
Mm-hmm. So they offered tutoring and paid mileage to mom. And then I don't know if what happened at tutoring, but often maybe that there was some guidance given to that parent, like, hey, maybe you should do more than just what you've been doing by complaining and get an attorney. So in July 2022, the students in 8th grade, a mom files due process. It goes to, the IHO, and they found a preponderance of evidence that the student was not denied FAPE with respect to proper identification, because that was an issue, was the student properly identified? And then also with the assessment of the student's disability. There were 2
that
progress.
Part makes sense to me, because in the sense that the eval, the disability doesn't drive services, right? So the eval saw the IQ piece, but it's also potentially one piece of data that they're using, and it may not be appropriate to switch categories. So I can get behind that one.
I can too. It definitely, I feel like programming looks a little different if you have a student that has an IEP under ID versus under SLD, but that by itself wouldn't be a denial of FAPE. So there should have been 24 progress reports during this period of time since the student's been on IEP, and the families received 2.
It's so wild.
Yes. And I want to say that would never happen. We probably know that occasionally happens. But in our small districts, potentially.
Think of the case manager numbers that you've had in that amount of time.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I mean, that to me speaks to it being a systemic issue across the district, because it wasn't just one teacher's really bad at that, right? I mean, because that happens, but then you get to a different grade level in a different school or whatever, and it's different. But the fact that for that long, ooh, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But then why even bother with the 2? Where'd those come in?
This is the same way I send out regional newsletters. There should have been a lot.
Once a month, Stefan's I really need to do the newsletters.
And then he doesn't do it. So, we're concerned. We're listening to the case going, that's a problem. But the IHO found in the district's favor, stating that the absence of progress reports did not rise to the level of a denial of FAPE. And then they said that the mom felt she was able to ask questions at the IEP meeting. So it didn't deny her parent participation, because that's the other issue, is if the parent isn't aware of their student's progress, how can they meaningfully participate in the conversation at the IEP? So they said, no, she was fine. Everything was fine.
So, sorry, can I ask a question? So they're saying that the lack of progress reports doesn't change FAPE because they're still getting the education. You're just not notified of it, but you're notified enough in your once a year meeting, so everything's okay.
Essentially, I think that's where they were at. It sounds like they were really just focused on, was the procedural error a denial of FAPE, which is how they're supposed to look at procedural errors, right? But they didn't really, so this ends up going to a district court. So then we get their opinion, and that will clarify what mistakes they made. But honestly, the findings in this case were very shocking to me, just because even though it escalated to district court, it's not a new lawsuit with new claims. It's just an appeal-like review of the administrative record, and the court reviewed the evidence that was already presented in the hearing. What do you think they're going to find based on what you guys... So let me review the 4 claims that the family was making. 1 was the IEP reasonably calculated? 2, was the IEP properly implemented? 3, were the evaluations adequate? 4, was there a lack of meaningful progress? And 5, was there a denial of FAPE?
I'm going to stick on the meaningful progress part. I have concerns about the length of the procedural errors, right? Like when I'm not getting updated for years on progress, that is a problem. And I think that the other piece is, we had that eval, and while the eval could be correctly formulated, all of the weight is on the IEP, right? Like it's the IEP team that needs to say, we need to do this. And that for the IEP team to take those goals significantly below a grade level standard would be shocking.
Yeah, I struggle with a lot of this because it felt like they didn't even know the kid they were writing these IEPs for very well. And then suddenly they pivot, and it's a whole different kid that they're writing them for. And so I would wonder about the quality of the original evaluation for sure. Thoughts, Anna?
Well, I guess I wonder about how do you prove your progress if you haven't been documenting and reporting along the way?
Yeah, so that's that whole difference between progress monitoring and progress reporting. It's possible they had progress monitoring data and didn't send a progress report. They didn't say that.
Then I would have expected to see that in the IEP. I would have expected for the IEP to say they mastered this reading goal. The next progression at grade level is this, and you would see those goals like spiral up along with the curriculum.
So they didn't help themselves, because the district actually submitted, when they have to turn in their paperwork to the courts, they wrote in mastery dates on the progress reports after, retroactively.
Can't do that.
Oh,
that seems like bad.
Right? So there's like just a lot of not great things happening.
What's funny
here
is I was even thinking like, well, you could just make your data up after, but then I was like, I shouldn't say that. And then that's exactly what they did.
Let me throw out this unethical hypothetical, and they just ended up doing it. So
yeah, it's possible that they did have the data and they weren't sending the progress reports on a cycle, right? Like sometimes that happens. And then later they're like, well, this is mastery. We have it in our data. It's possible. Again, that's
Anna, yeah. This is what I was saying I would do this morning, where I was like, I would do the work. It's just I wouldn't record the work. I wouldn't communicate the work.
But not on purpose. I also think like, Okay,
gross negligence.
logistically as a teacher, right? Like when I was teaching was before like there was a lot of Google Forms and stuff for data. So like we handed data and then we would graph it and then I'd upload it in the progress report and then our data sheets, unless it was like student evidence, we didn't keep year to year because it was documented in the progress monitoring. So like what are truly the chances that teacher from 6 years ago has the raw data sheet for that kid's progress? That is not happening. Unless you have a
Yeah, they
court.
didn't say it was happening. I'm just saying that it's possible that it was just not sending the progress reports and the work was being done. It's possible. That's not where the case is, though, right? So the case is, was it a denial of FAPE? And you guys are thinking, I don't think you answered all of them, Darcy. You thought that the eval was okay potentially on those 5 points. Do you think
Yeah.
they denied him FAPE?
No.
Based
I'm gonna
on,
go.
yeah.
I'm gonna go with no in the sense that procedurally they were having IEP meetings. Mom was attending the IEP meetings, involved in the meeting. I think I'm surprised the case can go back that far because usually you can only go back 2 years, but over 6 years, she had a lot of time to go, something's not right. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know if I feel great about that answer from a
right.
school stance, but I don't know if the court would say that that was a
So
FAPE issue.
Yeah,
yeah, I guess I've never thought about progress reporting being an aspect of FAPE, I guess, because in my mind, FAPE is about the access to the education, and the progress report doesn't necessarily take a lack of a progress report isn't a lack of access to your school day or your like academic instruction.
So remember when we talked about procedural violations and the three prongs basically that we are looking at to see if it is something that would result in the denial of FAPE. And one of them was that it would prevent meaningful parent participation. So that was the angle they were going at with that, the attorney for the parents. Was the procedural violation of not sending a progress report home enough of an impediment to the parent participation that it would result in a denial of FAPE? Okay.
I don't think so. I mean, didn't they say
I
earlier that
said
they?
okay, and nobody else could see that your head was shaking
Oh,
no. So
oh,
I'm just going to
oh, oh,
say,
gotcha.
for the
Yeah, that's right.
record,
Audio format,
Stefan's
Stefan. I'm
saying
over here
no.
conversing non-verbally. Does that help?
Right.
How many fingers am I holding up? For the record, that was two, but it was twisted and it looked like I had one finger up, and that's got a different implication. I mean, you said earlier that the parents were at the IEP meetings, had access to the ability to ask questions. Could this one end with essentially a slap on the wrist that's like, hey, no, FAPE wasn't denied, but like communicate your progress for Pete's sake?
Mm-hmm. No, that's exactly where it ended. So the district court upheld the decision of the, it wasn't ALJ, right? It was IHO
OHI,
and IHO.
independent hearing officer.
Yes.
Yeah.
They did say that there is an issue with not sending progress reports. And I believe that future courts, from what they were saying at the law conference, could reference this decision because they did note that it was wrong and that it could result in parents not being able to meaningfully participate. But there was no award for the parents. There was no, so that means like nothing was remedied. And the whole time I was presenting this case, we're all like, there's so many problems and so many
That kind of
errors.
sucks. Like that
It did
makes me
kind of,
nervous and like in setting the precedent that like progress reports aren't that important. Like that's kind of what that's saying. Which
It is a
more
different
important
circuit.
than doing your instruction now, but obviously you should do the instruction and prioritize that. But like, yeah, I don't know. I don't like that one.
Yeah, I would have thought like that's a procedural error, yes. But it's pretty big because it's literally part of the contract that you're signing with the family that you're going to provide. And you didn't do it for so long that it wasn't a one-off.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not like you missed one.
Yeah. We had 2 out of 24.
Yeah, I think that one's hard, and it kind of goes back to one of the pieces we've talked about before is that piece of paper that says school district you're supposed to doesn't always equal to you do.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't always equal to a slap on the wrist hard enough or big enough to make a change in their behavior.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I don't even think
that school district special ed director go, okay, this is what we're doing from now on, and I'm checking them and I'm looking at them for compliance and I'm making sure that they're going home. Like, was that enough to, I mean, I don't know how a director doesn't know that these aren't going home for years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Feels a little odd. And multiple, as Anna said, multiple teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what kind of, I mean, right, I'm always thinking about, okay, if it didn't change for this one kid, then did they fix it?
So what bothers me too about this case is that had they been doing progress reporting, they would have noticed that when they have a measurable annual goal, like I shared earlier about, I have to find it, citing textual evidence from a text with the use of worksheets, discussion questions, research projects, and discussions in one grade. And then several grades later, the IEP says that the student will blend and decode words to read second grade level text with 80% mastery. That not being a denial of FAPE somewhere is just shocking to me. Like, forget the progress reports. The fact that you weren't doing something right because you weren't even writing an IEP for the right kid, it sounds like, in the beginning. Either that or there was a like major event in this child's life that had a ton of, regression in their skills, which it doesn't say anything about that. That just would go back to how can you say they were providing meaningful instruction and making meaningful progress? So I just thought this case was wrong the whole time. I don't know that the progress reports by itself is a violation of FAPE, but you were not. How are you proving that you made progress? How are you saying that the IEP was reasonably calculated?
Well, I like that you're saying in our circuit that would be a problem.
It would.
That makes me believe in our systems more.
Well, we're used to our systems, and I feel like Darcy and I can pretty well, and you too, Anna, can predict the outcomes of cases in our circuit because they do seem to be pretty, we might not guess the award that a family will get correctly because those feel so arbitrary, but the decisions I'm not surprised about. But you go outside of our circuit, and I think the decisions can be pretty surprising. Thanks for tuning in to Spedsplaining. If you've got questions or thoughts about today's episode, we'd love to hear from you. Head over to our links where you can drop your questions, join the conversation, and connect with us. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode if you found it helpful. Until next time, keep on learning and stay curious.